Today we're going to sort of culminate everything we've learned so far about classes uh, and about arrays and about the ArrayList class, and and basically create an array of objects that we created in a student class, but we'll implement it in a slightly different way. We'll implement it in a way called an array list. Now, an array list is a class that you have to import into your Java main method to actually manipulate, just like you import the scanner class or a print writer class. So we'll go ahead, and we already know we need. We already set up the Java class file here, and we know we're going to need to import the scanner class, as always. Pretty much every single time we use Java, we have to import the scanner class. But also we're going to import, and it's also in the utility folder of it's called ArrayList. And you can think of an ArrayList as a more flexible array that is pre-set up as to have 10 spots, and we're not only going to use 4 today, but if you want to explicitly tell it to have more, you have to tell it tell the capacity of the list to be more than 10. All right. So first things first, we're going to still use the final integer, and students. That's one thing we're going to keep in. We'll only have four students. We'll also need a string variable name. We're going to store. Now, instead of just identifying students by a number, we're going to identify them by their name. We have to store the name in a string. And finally, we're going to have to declare the array list. So we have the student class open. So let's go ahead and initialize some of the functionalities of this, so that when we declare the array, it makes sense. So first things first, we're going to create a private string, and we're going to call it student name, and then we're declare a private integer, and it'll be the number of grades. So the number of grades that that can be stored in this object is going to be 4, and then finally we'll declare a private array, and we'll call that locally student grade, and we'll initialize that here, and we'll say it's num grade, and we'll set up the constructor. We'll obviously name it after the class, and the constructor will accept arguments. So it'll accept the string name and an array, a double array, and we'll again not be creative and use the name array. And we'll set not student grade, but student name equal to the name that's passed. And then I'm going to cheat here, and I'm not going to use a for loop to copy the array over into the object, but I'm going to use a special system command called array copy, and we're going to copy over the array that's passed, and then the argument is going to be 0, and then we're going to put in copy it over to student grade, and then the next argument is going to be 0, and then array dot length for the 4th argument. Just accept that just press the IB button. This is how you copy the more efficient and built-in way to copy an array between each other, instead of setting them equal to each other, which just sets the addresses equal to one another, or using a for loop to copy each individual element of the array. That's manually copying over and prone to error, and not really recommended. So anyway, so that's the end of the constructor. So we could basically copied over the array from the main method or whatever method's calling it from the main Java file, Java class, into the data field inside of the student class. So we're going to create a couple of really three methods. First method, super simple. It'll be a string. It'll be a string returning method, no arg. And we'll say get student name, all right? And we'll just simply return student name. So if the user wants to pick out the name, they can pick that out. The next one we'll go ahead and create. We'll sum the total totals of the grades. Really, you don't really need this as a user, but it is good to have inside of the class so that you don't have to sum up the grades inside of one method. So we'll say, forgot a period, grade array will be the local variable that we'll call here, and we'll set the accumulator sum equal to 0.0, and then we'll use an enhanced for loop to go through the entirety of the array, and we'll use grade array as what's passed over, and we'll set sum plus equal to value. And so what we have to do is return sum, and so that this value value sum will be returned. The accumulator sum will be returned whenever the method is called. The final method we're going to create is the average method, and it's pretty much what we recreated in the last video. It just averages out the grades. Doesn't really require anything require any arguments, since it'll just take the publicly available, well, at least the privately available data in the data fields of the method, and so we can just say student average. Here we'll set that up as what's going to be returned. So we'll say student average is equal to the sum grades method, and we'll pass in student grade, and then we'll divide that by num grades, which will be the numerator, and then we'll return student averages. And so that's the student class. It stores the name and it stores the grades, and you can get both, or you can get the average of the grades and the name of the student by calling it the main method. So back to the main method, we're going to create a array list of student classes. So how we do that is we'll say array list, and then use the diamond brackets to initialize it, say student, and then we'll call the reference variable student list, and we'll say this is a new instance of that student list, and we'll say array list here as the arguments. And then we'll go ahead and create an instance of the scanner class, so we can read user inputs as always. And then we'll also do a system out call, and we'll print line, and we'll again say welcome to Java programming. And enter students' grades there, and we'll do another system out call, and we'll say print line enter student number one's name. So we'll say enter student one's name, and then here we'll use that name variable, and we'll set that equal to keyboard next line, and then we'll use that keyboard next line input as and call the new instance of student list, and we'll add that item to the list. We'll say new student dot or student, and then we'll just use that function call to put in name, and then we'll say collect. We'll collect grades, and so we have to have a way to collect those grades, right? So let's create a new method inside the main class to collect the grades, right? And instead of having, we could just simply have 4 different for loops, so that's not very object oriented of us to do. So we want to collect those grades into a throwaway array, and then push that to the student class. So, and hopefully that's clear as mud, but we'll say public static double, and then it's going to return a double array, and we'll call this collect the grades. We want to have a way to collect the grades, and what we need to know is how big the array needs to be. We need to be initialized. So we'll just paste the scanner class in here again, and then we'll say double. We'll call this array grades as opposed to the old one. New double, and then amount. Use a local variable amount, and then we'll use a for loop to iterate through and get the user to input the grades. So pretty standard stuff we've done so far in the module, and we'll say system out here and print f, and we'll say enter grade, and we'll say enter grade 1. And so that's going to be an integer, so we'll just say whatever the index is plus 1, and then we'll use a system in or a scanner class to say grades I, whatever that index location is, and then we'll set that equal to keyboard next double. And then that way it'll continue to iterate through the length of the array, and when it's asking what the grade is, and then we'll return the grades array to the main method. So now here we can pass the array that was created in this collect grades this collect grades method down here into the student class. So we'll just say the only thing that it needs is how big it's going to be, or how many how many grades, actually is really a misnomer. It's how many grades a score that it needs to collect. So we pass students to collect grades, then create an array asking the user what grade did the student get in the first through fourth assignment, and then that's that. And then all we have to do here is copy and paste this four times. And we could also make this even more modular and pass all that, but we don't want to make it too convoluted. And we'll just change this to student 2, student 3, and then student 4. And so once we have all that information, then we can use enhanced for loop to iterate through the entire student list. So, and what we'll do here is create an instance of the student class, just like we would make an instance of, an integer variable to store it, or store the constants of a student. We'll call it portfolio, and we'll say student list. That's the student list we want to go through, and there we'll say system that out, that print line, and we'll say portfolio dot get student name, and then plus we'll say whoever's name is average grade is, and then we'll add that and say portfolio dot average grade, and that will output what the student's average grade is to the user. So let's go ahead and run this program and see what exactly happens. All right, and let's go ahead and run the program. Just enter student 1's name. Enter grade 1. Let's say it's 78, because I'm not that great of a student. 88, and 90, and 80. Student 2 is Joy. I'll say she made a 99, a 80, a 100, and a 96. Let's say Robert made a 67, a 77, a 78, and an 87. And then Tim made a 90, 88, 77, 66. And it reprints out, and Rab's average grade is whatever. So, hopefully, that made a little bit of sense to what we exactly did, but it's really a really powerful tool. If you think about it, we created an instance of a student each and every time. We could expand this to hold each individual grade and manipulate that data in a particular way. And you can think of it as a container or a bucket, but the bucket, each individual bucket manipulates the data in a certain way, and then we can organize that manipulated or processed data in a series of buckets that are indexable and searchable. Very powerful. Think about it. If you have any questions, please email me, send me a DM, let me know.